Okay, so good afternoon, good evening, and happy early Tuesday morning if you're in the Pacific Rim. So Patrick and I were talking away, and we just found out the live stream was not live. So we're gonna try this again. So I've actually just sent a message to somebody to check on the page to see if we can see it. I don't know if you're okay. We are live, so I just wanted to change something here a little bit. Okay, so yes, we are live, and we are powered by Rever. And if you want to learn more about Rever, just go to www.reverscore.com. So Patrick and I apologize for the late start. We had technical difficulties. Oh, the joy of technology, right, Patrick?
As someone who works in tech, I know too well it can break more often than it can work.
Sure. So, Patrick, why don't you catch everybody up with an introduction, and we're going to have a wonderful conversation about what we see coming up here in the next few months ahead, right?
Yes, absolutely, Bruce. Thank you again for the opportunity. My name is Patrick Ward. I'm the Director of Marketing at Rootstrap, which is an app and web development agency based in Los Angeles. The thing that I tell everyone to differentiate ourselves from every other thousands and thousands of app developers out there is we are the development team behind Masterclass, because that's a brand everyone knows. Really excited to join you today to talk about what potentially is on the horizon.
Yeah, right. And actually, we were chit-chatting in the green room before our first attempt to go live, and I was talking to you a little bit about the changes that you've seen with Rootstrap. So, and it relates to real life office space. So let's talk a little bit about what you're seeing there, Patrick, for the next several months ahead here.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a really interesting one. It's an area that tech is often the first mover, but I'd imagine that it's going to cascade across a bunch of different industries. So what I'm specifically talking about is in-person office space, specifically within the realm of commercial real estate. What's really interesting is, and we've seen this firsthand, our lease is ending at the end of September. And we've decided, due to the fact that we can all achieve our job remotely and have been doing so since the start of this pandemic, there really is no need to have a physical office right at this moment. Obviously, we will return at some point because there is still additional value, such as being able to have a space for clients to come and meet you. But at least for this short term, while we're still in the throes of lockdowns at various scales, there really isn't much sense. But more importantly, I want to talk about the trend. What's been really interesting to see is not only companies starting to question whether they need in-person space, but how much of that space. And what I'm predicting is that there's going to be this transition towards what I would call like hotspot desks. This has been seen in the tech industry for quite some time, where you go to an office, you don't necessarily have a specific workplace, you just are mobile around the different office areas, collaborating with different team members at different time periods, but don't necessarily have a dedicated desk. Right. I would imagine that tendency is going to come across many other industries when companies realize, hey, we can decrease our real estate footprint, from 5 times the size down to, a fifth of the size. That's going to lead to some massive savings for companies, particularly when I've looked at my company's financials and I look at the line items of administration costs. A big component of that is real estate, just purely owning office space, rental prices, utilities, all the other things that go into running a business, and they're fixed, right? You can't scale them up or scale them down. because you're still paying for the same amount of rental space, regardless of whether you have 100 employees in an office, 1,000 employees in an office, or 10 employees in an office.
Right.
You can kind of do some predictive measures, but it's a lot harder to adjust.
Right.
Another tendency I would imagine, obviously not right now given the health implications, but it'd be curious to see what happens with these spaces. Do we end up with more co-working spaces with flexible contracts, month to month? Do we end up with alternative uses of space? Obviously, we know that events, humans crave connection and they'll want events to come back at some point. So if that's the case, is that a use for these, vast swath of previously used commercial real estate into repurposing for those types of initiatives? I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens here.
Right. So that spurs a whole bunch of questions that I have. So if you're actually seeing this and you have questions for Patrick or I focus on cleaning up processes, and Patrick focuses on delivering very smart processes. So we're kind of similar but different in many ways. So if you have or if you have observations about your marketplace, we're in Southern California, and Patrick and hello Gracie Ruth, thanks for joining and helping us with our technical piece just now. Just make comments and we would love to feedback to you. So I know the in-person meeting is how we first met Patrick, and that's actually how I met Gracie Ruth, who's on the live, I see. So yeah, it would be awesome if we could gain some of those spaces that were being used by commercial entities to start doing our LinkedIn local in person again, right?
Absolutely. I think there's still a need for in person. It's not going to go away. There is still, even with the power of things like Zoom and Google Meet and Microsoft Teams and all the other different competitors, there's still something different about meeting someone in person, even if it's in a client capacity, if it's in a networking capacity, than it is hopping on a video conferencing. So I do think events are going to come back. It just sort of remains to be seen how they come back, and the time frame for them coming back. I think what we're likely to see is smaller, more intimate events being the norm for quite some time. It's going to be quite a while before we get to really large-scale events.
Right.
And we've already seen this. Most big conferences do not expect to come back for at least 2 years. And I'm talking the big things like Dreamforce, Inbound, these types of conferences that bring in literally thousands of people into a particular city. But certainly even now we're still getting murmurings for in-person events of a smaller scale, like think in the realm of about 20 to 50 people.
Right.
Those you can still, with enough space, do adequate social distancing and therefore have enough health implication or health policies put in place, but still allow people to meet in person. And this is really interesting when we look at, some of our prospective clients have had to put a pause on some of their initiatives because they were exclusively focused on in-person events, but even they are starting to have a chat with us along the lines of, looks like December is a good time for us to re-pick up the conversation. So obviously the fact that they're feeling confident about it suggests to us that, maybe we're a little bit closer than we think towards at least small scale in-person events.
Right. Yeah. So actually, if you are a commercial realtor, or if you know a commercial realtor and you're watching this, you might want to share this conversation with them. We would love at some point to have a commercial realtor as a live guest who could give us some really up-to-date things. Yeah, I think I agree with you, Patrick. I think the arena type events are long gone. But I don't know about you, but I would love to start again with the like 15 or 20 group size ish. And the reason I say that is I have 15 to 20 really meaningful connections that I've built. Most of them have come either from, interesting enough, the LinkedIn locals that we did in person, or through my continued presence here on LinkedIn. So I have some wonderful, meaningful connections that I would just love to be able to get in person. You know, I've done lots of calls, lots of Zooms, lots of different, you know, types of messaging. But yeah, actually being able to be in their presence and kind of feel their energy, as it were, would be awesome. So.
Yeah, and it's interesting when we look at the psychological impacts of what this means.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of studies have come out that have shown that the reason, you know, we all talk about things like Zoom fatigue. And the reason that that happens is there is actually a reason, a psychological reason for it, which is that when you are in person, you actually are able to pick up on some cues subconsciously, and it's easier for your mind to process it. Whereas when you're on a video conference call, your mind has to be very alert. Like you can't switch off, you can't disengage at any point. And this is not like disengage in a negative sense. This is just allowing your mind to rest. But you can't do that over video conferencing. So when you get to the end of the day, even if you've had the same amount of meetings that you would have had in person, it feels physically more draining and mentally more draining to you. And I think that's one of the big reasons why, you know, people have been saying to me, oh, you know, I'm tired of all the meetings, or I get through all the meetings, but then I have a whole lot more work to do at the end of the day. And I think that's, if anything, a reason for people to come back in some capacity when it is safe to in person, because we've seen this, that I feel you know, the US mindset was very much quite positive going into the pandemic. Yes, there was a lot of hardship, but there was also a lot of people going, okay, like we're going to have to do this, we're going to have to do this for this period of time, and you know, we're going to be super productive. That's certainly what I was hearing, you know, the first couple of months. Now it's got to a stage where it's like, well, how much longer am I going to have to do this? I'm starting to be sapped of my productivity. It's getting really difficult for working parents who, you know, it was already hard enough having to deal with their kids over the summer break, being around all the time. They have to balance work as well as being good parents to those children. At the same time, now they're, you know, dealing with the confusion that results around education. Do I have to be doing it myself? Are they going back in person to school? Is it a hybrid model? If it's a hybrid model, how much of that falls on me as a parent? Like, it gets very challenging. I certainly, you know, I admire but do not envy my coworkers and colleagues who have children, and I'm seeing them visibly struggle with it. Now, certainly, I as a good coworker am able to provide support, you know, fill in the gaps where needed, but yeah, it's a very trying circumstance with little end in sight at the moment.
Right. Well, it's awesome that you're that very supportive senior manager, and I know your team must really relish that, Patrick, and that's awesome. And yeah, I agree. Like today, I have 6 Zoom calls, and I know that my active listening skills will be like 0 by the end of the 6th call. But it's interesting. I was having a long conversation with a relatively new connection this weekend, Joy Osaka Liu. And we were both talking about, yeah, you pick up on, it's like you have a tuning fork and you tune into people's energy, and you can shift, you can see when the energy shifts around in the conversation, and it helps you to either stop talking and let the other person take up the baton to talk, or it just helps you sometimes to talk a little more or ask some more leading questions, right? So So that tuning into the energy and really listening to the rhythm of the conversation is what you miss not being in person, for sure.
I mean, I felt this last week. I actually met with a potential client for Rootstrap. I met him at a coffee shop, and so we were able to, be near each other but distant. And the hour that we spent together just flew by. It was super easy, and yet I found myself after that interaction comparing it to hour-long Zoom calls I've had, which feel like they can drag on forever. They're still, they're useful. You have to do them, but it's just interesting, that dynamic of how time, the human mind is really interesting how it perceives time. It's not linear in that sense. How it perceives time in one environment is very different to how it perceives time in another. So it's certainly been an interesting trend.
Yeah, I get that trouble. When I'm awake, sometimes it goes real slow. When I'm asleep, it goes really fast, right? So
very much so.
Especially if you're really tired from active listening all day, it's like, oh my goodness, like, where's my pillow, right?
Exactly.
Sure. So it's interesting you talked about some hybrid and kind of repurposing of spaces. And I know you're a big believer in repurposing of technology in spaces. So what are you seeing on the horizon there? Any new exciting developments, Patrick?
Yeah, it's really interesting on the technology side. It seems like, funnily enough, of all things, that is really picking up machine learning. Machine learning's been around for, at this point, decades, but in many cases, we just haven't had either sufficient data or sufficient computing power. It's now getting to a place where there's a number of off-the-shelf tools. And it's funnily enough the biggest inquiry we're still getting to this day. People have done the demonstrable development, that's building of platforms, building of technology. Now it seems there's this big push towards making those platforms smarter with any sort of incorporation of machine learning that they can. That's certainly been a big thing. It's been interesting to see how that's taken precedence compared to some of the other technologies that I was more familiar with at the start of my career, where everyone was talking about 5G. That seems to have, it's weird. The only thing I hear about 5G now is how deceitful AT&T is by calling their latest thing 5G when it's not even 5G. And then the other big thing of my at the start of my career was IoT. IoT was super popular, of creating smart devices, pairing devices with software and hardware, those types of technologies. It seems like a lot of that has, at least from a pushing the envelope perspective, has gone by the wayside, although it still is appearing in healthcare. Healthcare is slowly starting to pick up on these additional ways they can deliver healthcare. Really, I mean, again, we talk about benefits of the pandemic, and again, it can be difficult to talk about such a subject where the pandemic has obviously derailed so many lives. But we look at some of the industries that really needed disruption, like healthcare, like education as well, and courtesy of this pandemic, it's forced many institutions that were saying, that's not for us, or we don't have to do this, or even if people were clamoring. I mean, people have been asking for better healthcare in this country for decades, if not a century. So given that, it is nice to see that, an unexpected benefit has been like this surge in telehealth and people taking better ownership and control over their healthcare, as opposed to, just sort of allowing the system to push them in any which way.
Sure. Yeah. I agree. The teledoc is not only more time efficient, but it removes the excuse for keep raising costs, right? If you're if you're teledocking, the doctor can, or the healthcare provider can see more patients. It's lower risk and probably equal or better to quality as well, because the medical professional can spend longer on the phone with you because they're not having to literally walk between waiting rooms and examination rooms and walking records all over the place. That's the other thing I see, is people still carting files of records all over the place. And it's like, whatever happened to a smart device to do that for you, right?
Exactly. I find it very interesting that, we were talking about this before, but as disruptive as this environment may be, it kind of was needed. In many ways, I think it's important for us to consider society as an organism. And like any organism, if it's doing things that are, of a detriment to itself, it needs to reset. It needs to recalibrate itself. And I think that's really what we saw here. And we see this across all aspects of society. There's a reason why markets go into boom and then trough periods. And then there's a reason why these disruptions happen. I think one of the most pleasing things that I've heard, because I knew for when I came to America that one of the biggest aspects of American work culture was this idea of live to work. Americans being very focused on their job, their career, and that was the biggest priority. And it's been nice to see this pause for reflection where a lot of people have realized, hey, okay, my job is important, but it's not the most important, and it's not the only thing that matters in this world. And I think that sort of wake-up call is always refreshing.
Yeah, it's cool to see how the transition a little bit to work to live has occurred. And the other thing I find intriguing in this disruption is that I've been seeing some stuff about the boom in entrepreneurship. So I think that's awesome. And it doesn't appear to be industry or age or country limiting anymore as well. So I find that pretty exciting, along with, as you mentioned, machine learning. And I have a funny little story. My wife texted me on Saturday with a picture. She's in the parking lot outside the Amazon Fresh, which is, for those of you that don't know, Amazon have set up 5 testing stores here in the Los Angeles County arena. And they're using machine learning, as I understand it, for selecting goods and being able to check out goods. So my wife loved it. She likes techie stuff. She's addicted to her smartphone. So the fact that she could go around the store and be on her phone and integrate with the Amazon Fresh software, that by the time she got to checkout, she was ready to go, and it was like awesome. So that's a great, to me, that's a great positive use of machine learning, and how all that's really disrupted even delivery of essential items like grocery store items. So
yeah, absolutely. I wanted to pick up on one point you just mentioned there of entrepreneurship. I think this has been another benefit that people have realized, hey, I can't marry myself to my job. Yes, I can be grateful that I have one. I can be grateful that I have, an income coming through it. But I think if anything, this pandemic has shown that the old adage of diversification really makes sense, and not just in terms of your investment portfolio, but really diversification of potential revenue streams that you have at your disposal. I knew, from personal experience, this was very important to me coming into this pandemic of, yes, okay, Patrick, you've still got a job. That's wonderful. Be grateful for that. But nevertheless, what else can you use this time for? Because as you know, Bruce, at the start of this year, I was really looking forward to going around the conference speaking circuit. That was my big 2020 goal. And, needless to say, that was massively disrupted. Now, I could have, sat in a corner and bawled my eyes out, but I didn't. I thought of like, okay, what else can I do? So I started doing a lot of virtual speaking. I started working on a LinkedIn course, which is about to be released, on how to leverage LinkedIn based on my own experience and lessons there. And then I also put together a website called shorelisted.com, which is about my experience within remote work, offshoring, outsourcing, digital nomads, visas, those types of initiatives. And I just got word from the business partner that I have, who I'm doing that site with, that we just hit 800 visitors a month, which is amazing. Wow. And we just started this at the start of the pandemic, so March, April time period. And so that's the type of thing that I've been, pleased to see, that while, yes, it's important that, we focus on our careers and we still, maintain that, the entrepreneurship aspect, because, again, a lot of people say this, but it is true. It's never been a better time. There's never been, more tools available to you to get an idea started for very low cost, where previously there were huge barriers to entry.
Sure. I want to come back to shortlisting in a minute for a specific reason. Talking to entrepreneurs, we have Connie Medina that I think you've met virtually, right, Patrick? And
absolutely.
We have Karina, who joined us, and she was a new connection for me when we did a LinkedIn local virtual with Gracie Ruth's help. So that was awesome, because it was in that sweet spot of like 15 or so people. So it was just like a LinkedIn local, but we did it virtually, and we did the round table thing that we would normally do in person, but we did it virtually. So that was cool. So I have a contact called Michael Ryan. So if you're not connected to him, he is extraordinarily interested from an operational point of view on offshoring, Patrick. So perhaps after the broadcast, you could put that website into the comments. And also, I believe you have a YouTube channel as well. Do you want to?
Yeah,
so
they're both the same. So it's Shore Listed. So Shore spelt as in offshore. So SHORE, and then Listed LISTED.com. You can also find that on YouTube. Generally speaking, most of the videos, so it's actually, funnily enough, how I produced the website. I made these videos ostensibly just a brain dump from myself of, all the information about a certain topic. And then from the videos, I was able to turn those into articles. And so it was a nice hybrid model of both having the article, if people preferred an article format to consume information, or a video format if people preferred that. It's all been based on my own experience. It just kind of got to a point where it's like, okay, I've worked with developers, VAs, designers, marketers, copywriters, you name it, all across the world, as well as being someone, naturally being an immigrant myself to the US, who's always been fascinated by, this idea that people don't necessarily have to be born in one place, grow up in that same place, and work in that same location. There's a lot more flexibility to our globalized world. So I figured that given I had that experience, it made sense to start writing about it, as well as a lot of interesting trends. We funnily enough, have seen a real surge in the recent traffic numbers to the site based on digital nomad visas. That's been a really interesting new trend, where Estonia came out with their recent one. I know that a couple of countries in the Caribbean, like Bermuda, came out, and Barbados, I believe, was one, all trying to attract, particularly, I want to say, working professionals. That seems to be what most of these digital nomad visas target specifically, but realizing as a result of the pandemic that, hey, you don't have to work and live in one location. You can be almost anywhere in the world, and provided you've got a decent Wi-Fi connection, you can do much of the same tasks. And I think we've seen that not even just from a perspective of going, outside the US, but even inside the US. When we've seen this, right? Facebook, Twitter, a lot of those big tech companies have been saying, hey, you're allowed to, you don't have to be in the Bay Area anymore. So what's happened? Well, people have started migrating out to other more affordable locations. And then we've seen cities pick up on that fact of offering incentives for those tech workers to come to their cities. So it's a really interesting time period for people realizing that, hey, yes, I need to work in order to earn money, but I can do it on my terms, rather than, quote unquote, working for the man.
So that is a really interesting concept you mentioned, Patrick, particularly if somebody has a gift for writing. I know that you did that brain dump, and you were also, as I recall, able to get picked up by Forbes, right, as a writer, because of you basically just sharing all of your experiences. So again, that might be an opening for people. They might be great writers, and they might think, well, there's no way I can be an entrepreneur just writing, but you are living proof that is the way, right?
Oh, very much so. And not only myself, but also writers I've worked with. I have one of my writers I work with right now was living in Costa Rica for a while. Similarly, Eastern Europe, interestingly enough, if you're looking for expert writers, like things like doctors and those sorts of like very specialized professions that usually, if you found them in the US, wouldn't have time to write, Eastern Europe's been like a really interesting case. And so, yeah, if you have any sort of capacity for writing, and even within writing, there's so many different categories of it. There's, can you produce, technical white papers? Can you produce ebooks? Can you produce direct response? Can you produce, SEO landing pages? There's all these different types of writing. And then from there, once you start applying that mindset, you can start realizing that there's so many different tasks that you are able to do that can immediately get you started in entrepreneurship. So if you have a flair for design, there are many places where you can start monetizing that design skill. If you have a flair for, video editing, I mean, just think of how many, YouTube creators or other video creators there are out there. Needless to say, many of them, while they try and do it themselves, it's video editing is a challenging skill. So there's something as well. There's a whole bunch of different areas that I think people forget. And I would say, I will caution everyone just from one aspect, if you are interested in getting online and starting to, be successful in some sort of foray into entrepreneurship, don't spend big first. That was the first thing I did with Shortlisted. I made sure I did as minimal expenditure as possible before I proved it. Now that I'm proving where I'm getting traction, there's elements where I can start to outsource. But I think one of the big mistakes people make is they get lured in by these quote unquote gurus about, make $1,000 a day with online marketing. Well, think about it from this perspective, and think about it from this very critical perspective. If they were successful in the thing they are purporting that you can make money in, why do they need your money for their course? It's a very simple, critical thing to evaluate, but a lot of people don't. And I've seen people waste thousands and thousands of dollars on courses that don't do anything for them. So get out there. There's so many free tools. I mean, think about it. You can go on like Wix.com or Squarespace or any one of these other servers, buy a domain for $1 and just start seeing if you could put a website together and see if that generates anything. I would always say the benefit of now is that you don't need to sink a whole lot of money in to test an idea and then only pour money in to accelerate it once you've proven that idea.
That is amazing advice. And in fact, for free as well, you can obviously use all the tools of LinkedIn, which is what we're streaming to. As I mentioned you, Patrick, I'm also streaming to my YouTube channel. And the reason for that is I've seen a lot of guidance about, there's probably a reclaiming and a rebirth of YouTube. And the fact that, YouTube and LinkedIn works really well together. So those are free. And as you know, Patrick, I said to you, I do a lot of testing and a lot of things don't work for me. But that allows me to then sharpen my pencil and sharpen my focus on the things that do work for me. So yeah. Don't forget, you've got meaningful connections and other connections for a reason. You can run ideas past them, and they'll be pretty honest with you. I've really found that. So, free market research, right?
Absolutely. I think it's so important to get those ideas out there and test and see. And then once you get a little bit of traction on one of those ideas, then you push the barrier a little bit more and a little bit more. And we found this with Shortlisted. There was a bunch of articles that didn't really do much, and that's fine. Like, okay, they weren't successful, but now we've got a really good data set of, okay, well, here are our top 5 articles that are getting really good traction. Why are they getting really good traction? What about them? What is the element that is resonating with people in these particular cases? And then that suddenly means, okay, well, when we're deciding which videos need to, be boosted in quality, and sure enough, that, like you say, that's the next step for us because of YouTube being a big play now. Now that we have, I guess you would say, the MVP model of the video, now we need to refine that, because at the moment, those videos are like 25, 30 minutes, and it's essentially me brain dumping. That's not very crisp and clear. Now I'm thinking, okay, which ones do I need to go back, re-record, thinking getting it trimmed down to about a 5 to 10 minute really tightly recorded video, and improve that that audio and visual quality. By doing that puts not only that page or that particular article in a stronger light. Now we can start thinking about, okay, well, what does this mean for the site? What types of people should we be driving to the site? What sort of information do we want to start gathering? Do we want to start producing reports, or all the other different ways that you can start to monetize? I think one of the interesting things about the mindset of taking courses, and I'm a big believer in additional education, but I follow on what Richard Moore says, where he says, are you learning for the sake of learning a new skill, or are you learning for the sake of procrastinating? And I think this is a really important thing, because if you're just taking this course to feel like you're doing work, then you're not doing work. It is a much better mindset. And again, I get it. It sucks. It really sucks to do a lot of ideas and have a lot of them fail, but it's the only way that you're going to find what works. I found this literally last week. We've been pitching for Rootstrap an EdTech report about the trends, or the impact of COVID, I should say, on the EdTech industry. And the first time I blasted it to 400 journalists and not a single bite. And then I tried to revisit, okay, well, what's not working about this? Then I tried again with a different set. I think it was education bloggers. Same deal, no response. Then I tried with student publications, so university newspapers run by students. And I recently just spoke to, and I believe the story should come out soon, with UC Berkeley's student newspaper. Now, that only happened because I was able to not only see what wasn't working, but then humble myself enough to know, okay, I need to find some sort of pitch angle. So I was able to speak with several students, or former students, I should say, who helped me craft that pitch, and that pitch that they helped me craft is the one that succeeded. Now
Right.
that taught me a couple of things. One, if I hadn't done a first run, I wouldn't have known what was wrong about that particular first pitch in order to change. And it also said the power of collaboration, right? Finding people, being able to say, look, here's my goal. I'm trying to achieve this, but I don't exactly know. Can you help me because you have experience in this area? And people are always very happy to share their insights about an area they have expertise in.
You bet. So yeah, go check out shorelisted.com, correct?
Yep.
Or Patrick's channel. It's easy to go to YouTube. You can subscribe there. And yeah, if you're a writer and you want to dump some articles together, LinkedIn has a place to do articles. It's also got a place to store documents, which shame on me, I don't do very much of that because I'm not a really fluid writer. I write because I kind of have to, but but I know some people love to write. And you mentioned something about
one little hack I'll give to people. So if you are uncomfortable writing, but you want to get more of your writing out there, a really nifty way is just record yourself speaking. You can just use your smartphone and then take that. I mean, there's literally thousands of transcription services. You can use something like rev.com, or another thing you can do is go onto Upwork and find writers. Funnily enough, writers who take inspiration from a piece of material, like a file that you've recorded for them, cost way less than if you ask them to write it themselves. And it makes sense, right? If I ask someone to write an article from scratch, they need to factor in research time, they need to factor in all of that extra work before they even write. So it can cost you $200 or so. But literally, I found for even like $30, you can find someone who they're not just going to transcribe what you put into that audio file, but they'll put it into a format that will actually, make sense for an article. So again, if you're not comfortable writing, try the audio route.
All right. So you said Upwork has a feature for that?
Upwork has people that can do it for you. If you want to go cheaper than that, then I would suggest either rev.com or another additional hack, which is completely free, but it will take a little bit of time. If you upload that file to YouTube, YouTube will auto-generate captions, and then you can download that caption file and turn that into an article. So there are many different ways you can get it done without having to physically sit down and start writing, because that can often be the hardest way if you're not a natural born writer.
So see the power of conversing with meaningful connections and collaborating. I had no idea, Patrick, that was there. So thank you. So I'm all about simpler, faster, better. So I am gonna try that because I've been challenged to actually write a couple of articles on a couple of sentences that I was talking to Joy Osaka Liu about this weekend. So she set the challenge for me. Hey, why don't you write an article about this? Like, oh my Lord, really?
well, let me say, just as an example of how much faster you can do this rather than writing. Even myself, and I am literally a professional writer, I was finding when I started Shorelisted, I was taking about a week to put together an article. When I started doing the recording first and using that as the inspiration for the article, I was doing 5 a week, literally 5x my production. And it made total sense because it's like all the information was here in my head. I just needed to get it out onto the page. So it was so much easier to do, just literally having a source material rather than having to go, all right, you've got a blank piece of paper in front of you. Where do you start?
You are an inspiration, my friend. You are the embodiment of simpler, faster, better. You know, by saving process steps, time, and in your case, effort, right?
Absolutely.
Which is money indirectly for you, right? When you have to spin your wheels doing extra effort, that's actually extra cost for either yourself in terms of generating more business or in terms of helping your team be successful, right? So
Absolutely.
cool. So I did want to do a little, you talked about simplification. So I wanted to do a little shout out. This live is powered by Rever. So if you want to learn more about Rever, www.reverscore.com. It's in the ticker. So go check them out. They have some fun smartphone based improvement tools. So, wow, Patrick, we have been talking. So, is there something you'd like to kind of wrap up with? How would you put a nice bow around this conversation of what you see coming down the pipeline?
Yeah, I think the key takeaways I want people to understand is like, yes, disruption has happened, but more of it is certainly on the horizon. And in many ways, I want people to take away two key points. One, yes, it's a job. Yes, it's important. Maybe it's your lifeline, it's your income, but don't let it rule your life. If anything you should have taken away from this is that the people, the humans, the family members that you've been more in touch with, that is the real meaningful essence of life. I think that's something that I've always implicitly known as an Australian, but I think it's something that I've encountered more often than not here in America, that this sort of worship of the corporate world. And then the other thing I want to say is the strong element of diversification, finding new ways to generate income. And again, knowing that it won't happen overnight, but even that was the whole reason I started Shortlisted. The only reason I started it was I was thinking, okay, what can I start now? I have this free time, and how can I beneficially use this time to serve me in the future? Won't make money instantly, but when it does, it will be very handy. There's so many free ways you can get started. So please reach out to either myself or Bruce, because seriously, you might not think your skill is transferable online. I would say wrong. There's pretty much a way to transfer almost any skill into some form of online side gig.
You bet. I'm going to be selfish. We were chit chatting in the green room before we went live. You know, I mean, look at myself, right? I was, you know, I'm a baby boomer. This time last fall, I was pretty technologically inept, and I have pushed myself to learn and prosper and grow. And I've tapped into, you know, people like yourself, Patrick, that it comes second nature to you. It didn't to me. So I wanted to publicly thank you for, I know my first ever LinkedIn Live, you graciously spent time offline preparing me for that and helping me understand, well, Bruce, you know, it can go wrong like it did this morning. We didn't go live straight away this morning, so we had to back out and start again. So thank you for that, Patrick, and thank you for all you do in our local community. And again, if you're in the Southern California, particularly the Los Angeles County region, and you're seeing this and you don't know Patrick, you need to reach out and connect with him. So you don't mind direct messages, right, Patrick?
Not at all. Please do. I appreciate a direct message that isn't a sales pitch. So please reach out.
Well, probably no Bitcoin or Forex or other digital traders.
No Bitcoin, no lead generation, no. I run a mobile app development company as well, and no one pitching me as a SaaS founder. I'm not a SaaS founder, so please don't say I'm one.
Right, you have all of that stuff already, right? So why do you need more? Right? All right, well, if you could hold for a minute, Patrick, I'm going to let everybody go. Thanks again, Powered by Rever, and we appreciate the comments and the time and the support and love that you give us all. And I see there's a lot of Southern California connections on this feed. So awesome. Thank you so much. Bye for now.